بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Continuing our discussion on the stations of Tadhakur and Tafakkur, contemplation and emotional remembrance, the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, Abu Ismail al-Harawi, says that وَإِنَّمَا تُجْتَمَى ثَمَرَةُ الْفِكْرَةِ بِثَلَاثَةِ أَشْيَاء قِصْرُ الْأَمَلِ وَتَدَبُّرُ الْقُرْآنِ وَتَجَنُّبُ مُفْسِدَاتِ الْقَلْبِ الْخَمْسَةِ. Here he's saying that if you want to benefit from contemplation. So remember, we have contemplation and emotional reminders. And last week we talked about maw'idah, a emotional reminder, in that certain words are said that are meant to have a impact on the person, an impact that changes their behavior, or at least sparks some sort of agreement or acceptance that there are certain things that need to change, I need to do better, right? Here, he's saying that in order to benefit from contemplation, right, in order to reap the fruits of contemplation, you need to do the following things, or the following things need to happen. So the difference between last week's class and today is that last week was about the initiation, right? There are certain things that need to happen in order for this process to initiate, right? Here, he's talking about contemplation in order for you to reap the fruits of your efforts, right? So this is the second level of the process. The first level is the first level is becoming convinced, right? Having this accept, you know what, I do need to change. You know what I'm doing here is wrong, or I have shortcomings here, I need to change it. That's the first step, and that is the maw'idah. The tafakkur, contemplation, is what comes after, when a person starts actually thinking about what they need to do, how they need to do it, what the Quran is telling them, what the Prophet ﷺ is telling them. And in order to benefit from this, there are three things as well that the person needs to accept, that they need to make it part of their the equation of contemplation. Number one is qisr al-amal. That is qisr al-amal, you can translate it as having or short-lived hopes. Right? And again, it's sometimes difficult to translate these words, but what's coming to my mind is short-lived hopes. And what that means is you recognize and acknowledge that this life is very short. If you truly want to appreciate the Quran and what the Quran is teaching us, if you want to open your mind to the concepts of the Quran so that your mind can truly contemplate it, right, you need to accept the reality that life is short. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He's not talking about how to establish yourself in this life, right? He's not providing us with a book of economics or investments and going around doing book signings, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not concerned with us becoming very wealthy in this life. He is concerned with our prosperity in the afterlife, more so than this life. And therefore, this life is meant to, is an investment for the next life. So if wealth in this life is going to better our situation in the next life, then that's the investment. But if it's going to harm it, then that's a poor investment. Likewise, if living day to day in this life or paycheck to paycheck is better for the person's afterlife, and that's the investment. That is the profitable investment. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala many times in the Quran reminds us of how short this life is. And among the verses include وَيَوْمَ يَحْشُرُهُمْ كَأَنْ لَمْ يَلْبَثُوا إِلَّا سَاعَةً مِّن نَهَارٍ يَتَعَارَفُونَ بَيْنَهُمْ. And on the day when we resurrect them, it's as if they will feel as if they only stayed on this earth for an hour or a portion of a day. يَتَعَارَفُونَ بَيْنَهُمْ. And in this time, the day of judgment, people will actually engage with one another and converse with one another. They'll get to know other people. And one of the questions Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that we will ask one another is, how long was your life? And the common response was, it felt like an hour. It felt like a portion of a day. Okay? And this isn't strange, by the way. Contemplate your own life. How many years have passed by in your life? But how long has it felt? Very short. It even feels like a dream, right? Well, I was there, I was born and raised in Chicago, and then I spent 7 years in Jordan, but You know, it seems like it was just a dream. That's how fast it is. And one of my professors at the end of a semester, he's an older guy. At the end of the semester, he asked us, you know, this semester went by pretty quick, right? What do you guys think? He's like, yeah, it was extremely quick. It felt like just a week. He's like, yeah, that's life. That's life. That's how it feels. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَأَنَّهُمْ يَوْمَ يَرَوْنَ مَا يُوعَدُونَ لَمْ يَلْبَثُوا إِلَّا سَاعَةً مِّن نَهَارٍ, similar to the previous verse. قال كم لبثتم في الأرض عدد سنين قال لبثنا يوما أو بعض يوم فاسأل العادين قال إن لبثتم إلا قليلا لو أنكم كنتم تعلمون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will also pose a question on the day of judgment. How long were you on this earth? Or how long did you live on earth? They said we lived a day or a portion of a day. So ask those who actually counted. And they will say, we stayed for very little time. That's real. Live 1,000 years. Live 1,000 years, you know. Some of the very first generations, they used to live 1,000 years. But in the end, how long ago was it? How much time has passed? 1,000 years in comparison to human history is nothing, right? You know, what's 100 years? If you study history, what's 100 years? You go over it in a year, and you go over it in an hour, one class setting, right? And that's life. So no matter how long of a life we have, no matter how much we achieve in this life and obtain of worldly gains, you know, in the end, when you compare that to eternity, what is the ratio? Say 1,000,000 years. What's the ratio of 1,000,000 to eternity? I mean, there is no ratio. That's an invalid, you know, ratio. You won't even get a number. And that's reality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَتَخَافَتُونَ بَيْنَهُمْ إِلَّا بِثْتُمْ إِلَّا عَشْرًا نحن أعلم بما يقولون إذ يقول أمثلهم طريقة إلا بثنا إلا يوما. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you know, in similar context, He says that we will be quietly talking to one another, whispering to one another. You know, how long were you on earth? How long did you stay? And some will say, you know, we stayed for 10 days. It just felt like 10 days. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the most sound-minded of them will say, إذ يقول أمثلهم طريقة إلا بثنا إلا يوما. You know, we only stayed for a day. Just so short. And in order to truly appreciate this concept of short-lived hopes of this life, specifically of this life, and in order to have this type of certainty, we can build it in the following way. تيقن زوال الدنيا ومفارقتها وتيقن لقاء الآخرة وبقائها ثم يقايس بين الأمرين. If you want to build the certainty or the certitude that this life is not worth it, then do the following. Be certain, be sure. You know, convince yourself, and it's not hard to do this, convince yourself that this life will end and that you will leave this life. Right? So if a person were to live until the day of judgment, until the horn is blown, in the end, what's the end result? The world falls apart. The world goes away. If not, then you will eventually, sooner or later, leave this life. And this is we can't even argue this or argue against it. The best a person can do is try and live a longer life. And I'm sure there's certain research out there, how can we prolong human life, and is any medicine or any, you know, apparently now that they're inventing these nanobites that they inject in a person, and it detects diseases and viruses, right, before they start harming the body, and they go and they take care of it. It's really interesting, right? And hey, you know what? It might help human beings live longer. It might help human beings revert back to the 1,000-year lifespan that, we don't want it, right? You know what? If someone doesn't believe in the next life, right, then trust me, they want it. Who would want to cease to exist, right? But in the end, you know, what's 1,000 years? As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَوَدُّ أَحَدُهُمْ لَوْ يُعَمَّرُ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ وَمَا هُوَ بِمُزَحْزِحِهِ عَنِ الْعَذَابِ أَن يُعَمَّرُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, you know, some of them wish to live 1,000 years. But Allah doesn't say they'll never live 1,000 years. Right? What does He say? He said, in the end, it's not going to take you away from hellfire. If a person's heading to hellfire 1,000 years, what is that going to benefit them? It changes nothing, because the end result is the same. Live 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years. No one wants to be there in the first place. So, reminding yourself that this life will end and that you will leave this life, and to remind yourself of the certainty of the afterlife, the realities of the afterlife, and that the afterlife is eternal. We will return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the Prophet ﷺ says, "Udhkuru hadhimi al-ladhat." Remember the destroyer of pleasures. Remember death, the destroyer of pleasures, because it's very healthy for our mind and especially for our heart. So to be certain that there is a next life and that that next life is eternal. Imagine, subhanAllah, imagine 1 billion years will pass by, and then another billion years will pass by, and then another billion years, another billion years. I mean, it's eternity. It's a hard concept to grasp, but it's the reality. We will never cease to exist or permanently cease to exist. Our presence, our existence will remain, right? Then, you take these two concepts, this life and its time and what it can offer, and the next life and its time and what it can offer, and compare the two. What is 100 years versus eternity? What is, a nice $1 million home in comparison to, the minimum reward of paradise is, or the minimum place in paradise, smallest, is the earth and 10 times its size. That is a minimum place. And compare the two, right? And it's a pretty clear answer, but it's a powerful one. If you think about it and contemplate it, now the next time you sit down and you have a little bit of free time, now you have the option, what should I do with my free time? Put this into the equation, and it gives you a completely different response, completely different answer. Should I sit for the next hour and watch a halal TV show, right? Or should I sit for the next hour and recite Quran, or do dhikr, or read a book about Allah or about Islam, or pray, or do some sort of good deed, or go to some sort of charity event, use my hands, my physical strength that Allah gave me and my health to help someone else? When you insert this into the equation, it's a very, very simple answer. But if the next life is outside of the equation, well, you know what? That 1 hour sitting and watching TV seems quite attractive, right? So what made the companions such a successful generation is because they knew how to use this equation, and they took it to heart. So if we want to benefit from our contemplation, if you want to you put our mind in the right spot in order to come out with insightful, valid, appropriate, good answers, remember this equation. Put the next life into that equation. It's the variable of the equation, right? And you can see how contemplating the Quran, for example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, oh, you who believe, don't cheat. Awful kayla wal mizana bil qist. Don't cheat. And when you're trading and selling and buying, don't cheat, right? Well, okay, if I can get an extra buck here and save myself an extra buck just by saying a lie, why not? It could become attractive. And some people think like this, right? Narcissists, for example, if you study narcissism, you find that narcissists don't feel guilty for what they do when they take advantage of people. They don't feel guilty. Why? Because I have the ability and they're too dumb. That's their problem, not mine. It's their fault. They're the ones who fell for it. They let me do this, right? This is narcissism. And some people can be like that. Hey, if I can con someone out of $5, why not? They're too dumb to realize it, and they deserve it, right? They should go and learn some things. But when you add the equation, well, there's a next life, and you'll be held accountable for that. Oh, even if I could, I shouldn't. I better not. I don't want to. SubhanAllah. No. So that's the first way of benefiting from our contemplation, is remembering that this life is limited and that the next life is the goal, is the point. The second way, or the second thing that needs to be done, the second element of reaping the fruits of contemplation, is Tadabkur al-Quran, contemplating the Quran. And that is really the point of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كِتَابٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ إِلَيْكَ مُبَارَكٌ لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ وَلِيَتَذَكَّرَ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. A book we have sent down to you that is blessed, so that you contemplate it, and so that the people of sound mind contemplate as well. So the people of sound mind are impacted and affected by the Quran. So if someone wants to benefit from the Quran, truly benefit from it, they need to give it time. Time in contemplation. They need to give it time in reading the books of tafsir. They need to give it time in trying to connect the dots between the Quranic concepts and our day-to-day life. Sometimes we feel this gap between the two. The Quran is, I understand what the Quran is saying, but it doesn't really seem realistic, doesn't seem practical. I don't get it, right? It's because they haven't learned how to take these concepts, understand their realities, and then link the two together. The Quran is speaking to our reality. It's a realistic book. It's not an idealistic book. It's real and realistic. It's talking to our situation, our realities, right? But there's this kind of effort that needs to be done to link our realities to what the Quran is telling us, so that we see how the Quran is speaking to our realities. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Indeed, we have simplified the Quran so that it is contemplated, or for contemplation. So is there anyone who will contemplate it? The Quran is actually quite a simple book. And if you want to appreciate how simple it is, compare it to, for example, poetry. Or compare it to a research, like an academic research paper. I guarantee you, if I were to print out a research, like academic research on the theories of depression, for example, right? You won't understand it unless you have some sort of background in psychology. And I'm not talking about an undergrad. An undergrad won't be able to understand it. They might say, I remember that word. But to actually get it all and grasp it and understand it, well, you need someone who has that background, that training. Quran isn't like that. The most layman person, the most uneducated person can pick up the Quran and make sense of it. Because that's the point. It is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is meant for anyone who Allah is relevant to. And that's everyone. And since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is meant for everyone, and everyone is meant to have a relationship with Allah, and everyone's purpose in life is to worship Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a book that talks to each and every single person, regardless of time and regardless of place. That is the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we have simplified the Quran for that. So never ever feel that the Quran is above your head. It's too advanced for you. Yes, there are certain levels of the Quran, certain conversations that the Quran has that require a little bit deeper understanding of what's being said. But the general principles of Iman Billah, believing in Allah, believing in the next life, the halal and the haram, what's prohibited and what's permissible, these fundamental concepts that are really the core of our Iman, anyone can understand. Again, there are some conversations in the Quran, some verses that require a little bit more insight and a little bit more training. But the general purpose of the Quran is understood and can be obtained and appreciated by any person who puts time and contemplation, a little bit of contemplation in understanding the Quran. And Al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah ta'ala says, نُزِلَ الْقُرْآنُ لِيُتَدَبَّرْ وَيُعْمَلْ بِهِ فَاتَّخَذُوا تِلَاوَتَهُ عَمَلًا. Hasan al-Basri, who was one of Islamic history's most renowned spiritualists, he says that the Quran was sent down to be contemplated. So therefore consider reciting it as an action, as an act of good deed, right? And what he means here, Allah Ta'ala Adam, is that do not take the Quran as something more of a ritual where you recite certain amounts of verses that you have, made a wird out of, a routine out of. So for example, many of us will recite one juz'ah, 20 pages a day, or maybe more or maybe less, whatever it is. It becomes this routine where it's just about reading it and alhamdulillah, we read it and we did what we wanted to do today. Hasan al-Basri is saying no, the Quran was sent down to be contemplated, so do not consider it a routine where you just recite it and that's it, but consider it to be an act, an action, where you actually try and perfect it. Do not let your goal be the end of the verse, let your goal be understanding what Allah is telling you. Let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speak to you. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in order for us to truly benefit from the Quran, we need to understand what it's saying and not just recite it. There is more for the Quran to offer than a beautiful thing, a beautiful set of verses to hear or recite, right? And Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi says something very beautiful. He says, there is nothing more beneficial to the servant of Allah in their daily lives and in their afterlife, and nothing that brings a person closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than contemplating the Quran. When a person is reciting the Quran, they're having a conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the hadith which I've mentioned in other sessions of, I have split prayer between me and my servant into two halves, and for my servant is what he or she asked for. Right? I'm not going to go over it again, but this hadith Qudsi, is a template for what the Quran is. We say something from the Quran, and then after each verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replies to us. It is a conversation between the person and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there is no way to have a more fruitful conversation with Allah. There's no way to have a more direct conversation with Him than by reciting the Quran. So there's nothing more beneficial to an individual than contemplating the Quran, because it helps, it lets the person get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one they are calling to and they call themselves to. And it shows them the best and quickest way to reaching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what a person attains from the blessings of this life and the next life, and the nobility and the exaltation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If the person comes closer to Allah, what do they gain out of that? And it also it educates a person on the shaitan and the devil, what he or they are calling to, and the path that they try to get you on, and the path that gets a person closer to the devil, and the punishment of someone who answers the call of the devil, and their humiliation, and how they get to that place in the first place, and the end results of that. So if you were to summarize the human goal, the primary human goal, and I think this is trans-temporal. Every time, every era of human history, this is a primary, if not the primary human goal, and that is happiness. Each person wants to live a satisfying and happy, stable life, right? And that's common sense. No one's going to say, no, I don't want to live a happy life, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you want to sum what Ibn Qayyim is saying, is that you see happiness, the Quran shows you how to attain it, and shows you what takes you away from it. And of course that translates for us from the Quran. Happiness is your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and hopelessness or depression is being close to the shaitan. Happiness is being on the straight path, and dissatisfaction is being outside of that straight path, being on a misguided path. That is what the Quran means to us, and I'm trying to use modern words to help help this idea come closer to our hearts and minds. And subhanAllah, when you read the Quran and you contemplate the wording of the Quran and the eloquency of it, you see that the Quran is, subhanAllah, for the lack of a better word, the Quran entertains us as we attain this goal. Meaning, we feel an amount of satisfaction just by listening to the Quran, by reciting it, by reading it. There is this interesting pleasure and satisfaction that we get out of it. We feel entertained. I don't mean to use maybe a worldly word, but I'm trying to use modern words to help us appreciate this concept of contemplating the Quran. If a person were to entertain themselves for 2 hours by watching a movie or reading the Quran, what I'm trying to say is that reading the Quran will bring about just as much, if not more, satisfaction than watching a 2-hour movie, right? That is a good movie. It's not a bad movie, right? We'll say it's a good movie, blockbuster hit, just to keep the competition going. So the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His mercy, gave us a Quran that really satisfies our need for entertainment, our need for relaxation, subhanAllah. Also the Quran, if you look at it, and I've mentioned this before, but just as a refresher, a reminder, all of the Quran goes back to Tawheed, monotheism. And Tawheed, if you think about it and contemplate it, is in service of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, the greatest way Allah praises Himself is to say La ilaha illallah. That there's nothing worthy of worship except Him. That makes Him unique, subhanahu. No one can claim that, only Allah. And therefore the greatest praise of Allah is to say La ilaha illallah. And you have a hadith which verify that. The best dhikr is La ilaha illallah. Right? And therefore the Quran, if La ilaha illallah is a praise of Allah, then the Quran from Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen to Min al-Jinnati wan Nas, the first verse of the Quran to the last verse of the Quran, all of it is about praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and showing His glory, subhanahu. Every single verse is telling us Allah is worthy of worship. Every single verse is telling us there is no one like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no competition. He has no equals. Right? He Himself is worthy of all this praise, subhanahu. Right? And that is the Quran. It is praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a praise of Allah. And then finally, number 3 are mufsidat al-qalb. And this is a longer section, but an important one. And that is what taints the heart. What hardens the heart. And there are 5 things that Ibn Qayyim points to here. He says, kathratul khilta, having too much social engagement. At-tamanni, wishful thinking. Wa-ta'alluq bi-ghayri Allah, being attached to other than Allah. Wa-shaba, being full, meaning in terms of eating, your diet, eating too much. And al-manam, sleeping too much or too little. These are 5 things that harm and taint the heart from being able to truly appreciate the Quran and engage it at a meaningful level. So the heart is always on a path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's always in motion, either towards Allah or away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's never stagnant. And what's interesting is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, says as-sa'ihat, about praising an attribute of the believers. And the scholars differ. What does sa'ihat mean? Siyaha. Ibn Qayyim chooses the opinion that it comes from the word siyah, and that is traveling, and that means the heart is traveling. It's either traveling towards Allah, getting closer to Him, or it's traveling away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, getting more and more distant from Him. So the heart is constantly in motion, and therefore we need to keep it in check and on the right path. We need to give it gas every now and then, or else gas is going to run out, have an empty tank, and therefore it will stop, or perhaps even go backwards. Storms come, for example, in your traveling, and you need to take care of the heart. Storms being the fitnas, the tribulations and the tests of life, among other things. Sometimes the road isn't so smooth. The city hasn't been doing a good job staying on top of their maintenance and whatnot. So you have to go through a bumpy road with a lot of potholes, and you have to deal with that. And that's life, and that's the heart, and that's what it's dealing with. وَإِمَّا مِنَ اللَّهِ. And the heart, if you really want to motivate yourself and keeping your heart clean, we need to constantly remind ourselves, and we've been going over this throughout the series and in other settings. The heart will not find rest, will not find happiness except with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because it was made that way. It was made that way. Without Allah, we lose it. With Allah, we gain it. And you see, again, I said it before, and I'm saying it again, because it's important. Hopefully people, who have younger kids or maybe see this video online can take this to heart. Without Allah, we fall into depression. And you see this in society, right? And I'm not talking about without rituals, without practicing a religion. Without Allah, meaning a person loses their purpose in life. Right? A person loses their vision. And without a purpose, without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they lose the ability to construct a future. And without the ability to construct a future, that's when they start falling into depression. That's when the body stops, the mind stops. They try and accept their situation even though they might hate it, but it simply doesn't work. Right? It simply doesn't work. And then the resort becomes either medicine or therapy and all this stuff, and it just goes into spiral, downward spiral. But with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a person's heart, it allows them to build that vision. I am going somewhere. It might not be that far in this life, but in the next life, oh, there's a lot. And nothing can stop me from attaining my next life, from investing in my next life. Nothing can. No matter what the person's situation is, if they are ill, if they are sick, if they are poor, if they are rich, if they are without family, or they're come from a big family, whatever their situation is, anyone and everyone at any moment can say Alhamdulillah, and that's an investment in the next life. They can say, oh Allah, make a dua, oh Allah, I have some requests. They can raise their hand and say, oh Allah, I need some help. So anyone who is with Allah is given the beautiful gift of being able to build and construct a future, to see a future for themselves. And again, it might not be in this life, but it's in the next life, which is more important. But seeing a purpose, seeing that I'm going somewhere, goes a very long way in fortifying an individual, fortifying the self and the heart from depression and these other types of mental illnesses, right? So this is to motivate us to really protect our hearts in a time when the heart is really not part of our discourse. It's not part of our culture. Right? No one really cares about the heart. They care about money. They care about, the beach. They care about some sort of trail or whatever. And all that is nice. But the heart needs to be in the equation, and we need to protect the heart. And Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayhi says, "Inna fi dunya jannatun man lam yadkhulha lam yadkhul jannat al-akhirah." In this life is a paradise. Whoever doesn't enter it will not enter the paradise of the next life. In this life is a paradise. Whoever doesn't enter it will not enter the paradise of the next life. What does that mean? Right? The Prophet ﷺ says that dhikrullah rawda min al-jannah, or kama qala alayhi salatu this remembrance of Allah is a piece of paradise. Meaning, when someone has a closeness to Allah, when someone sits down and thinks about Allah, or their heart is really engaging Allah, it brings them a type of joy, a type of satisfaction, a type of contentment that makes a person feel like they are sitting in a paradise. They're not physically in a paradise, but their heart is in one. And to give an analogy, perhaps, there's a time, for example, where you felt so happy. Maybe at a child's graduation or a wedding, right, or the birth of a grandchild. There's this type of happiness that comes and enters your heart. And it's so strong, so profound, so beautiful. You feel like, there's nothing bad in the world. This is what Ibn Taymiyyah is talking about. Everything could be bad in life. But if you had the remembrance of Allah, the remembrance of Allah is in your heart, it will bring this type of happiness, this type of contentment to the heart that feels like you are sitting down in a paradise. Because everything you need, you have it right there in your heart, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So among the goals of Islam, or I shouldn't say the goals, among the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the one who is religiously engaged in a correct and authentic manner is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them a type of happiness in this life as a appetizer for what they are going to get in the next life. And some of the spiritualists said that إنه ليمر بالقلب أوقات أقول إن كان أهل الجنة في مثل هذا إنهم لفي عيش طيب. He says that certain times pass on the heart where I tell myself, if this is what the people of paradise are feeling, right, then this is truly a beautiful life to live. So it might not be consistent every single day, every single second you're feeling this happiness and contentment, but there is this type of contentment that the heart does feel in this life to remind you what it was waiting for you in the next life. To give you a very small 1%, not even 1%, of the joy and happiness and contentment that you will have in the next life. But how do you get it? Through that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now we were just talking about the Quran. And how when you read the Quran, there's this type of satisfaction. You feel proud of yourself. You know what? I sacrificed a half an hour for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You feel this type of honor and dignity. That I didn't just throw away 30 minutes of my time, I invested it in something that is beneficial. And it felt good. That is what Ibn Taymiyyah is talking about. And another spiritualist said, مساكين أهل الدنيا مساكين أهل الدنيا خرجوا من الدنيا وما ذاقوا أطيب ما فيها قال وما أطيب ما فيها قال محبة الله والأنس به والشوق إلى لقائه والإقبال عليه والإعراض عما سواه. One of the spiritualists said, I feel bad for the people of this life, those who only pursued this life, didn't pursue the next life. They left this life and didn't benefit from the best it has to offer. Think of that. When we think of what's the best thing this life has to offer, maybe a vacation, some exotic retreats, all-inclusive trip or whatever, vacation, that juicy steak, whatever it might be. What is the best this life has to offer? The spiritualist says that they may have tasted all of that, but they didn't taste the best thing this life has to offer. So his students asked, and what is the best this life has to offer? He said, loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Having the love of Allah in your heart and feeling that closeness to Him. Feeling that comfort through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And looking forward to meeting Allah. In life, every moment that goes by, we get a little bit older, maybe a new gray hair comes out, and that, causes a person to say, man, I wish I was younger, right? No? That's only for the believer, by the way. All right, so that's a good sign, inshallah. No, but think about it, right? You might have, man, we were younger before, we had more energy, now this and now that, right? But for the believer who's looking forward to meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every moment that goes by, it's just one moment closer to meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Someone who's in college or working towards a major achievement, as time goes by, it's, I'm getting closer. I'm one day closer to graduation, or I'm one day closer to my award, or whatever it might be. As time goes on, it's more, you feel optimistic about time going on. Well, the believers like that until the last breath they take. Because I'm that much closer to meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Always something to look forward to, always a future in their sights. And putting the effort to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and striving to turn away from other than Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is the best this life has to offer. It is the best. And Allah created an entire universe that helps you in that regard. It's there for you to take. It's just about taking it. So, with that, I'll stop there before we enter the 5 themselves. So inshallah, next week we'll go through those 5, which are very important and very interesting, and to an extent fun, because we get to tease some people. Allah ta'ala a'lam. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in.